Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program 2016 Grant Application Assistance Webinar. The JMHC program is a very important initiative to help reduce the prevalence of individuals with mental illness that are in our criminal justice system and to promote further collaborations between organizations in both the criminal justice and mental health systems. After presentations by Maria Fryer and Nikisha Love from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, Jerry Murphy and myself, Lucia Kimmelman from the Council of State Governments Justice Center, there will be time for a Q&A session. To ask a question, please type the question into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions. If your question does not get answered during the webinar, please follow up via email after the event has ended. At the end of the presentation, we will provide email addresses for everybody speaking today. If you encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. Please understand that there are some technical issues you may not be able to resolve. For this reason, we are recording this event and we will be emailing the recording to all of our attendees as well as posting it on our website shortly. I will now turn things over to Maria Fryer from the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Hello and good afternoon. This is Maria Fryer, Policy Advisor for Corrections, Justice, and Mental Health. I'm here with my colleague Nikisha Love, State Policy Advisor with the Programs Office here at BJA. Welcome to the fiscal year 2016 Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program Competitive Grant Announcement. Next slide. Okay. For our presentation outline, and during this presentation, we will cover an overview of JMHCP, and we'll provide you with links to the solicitation, your guidance for the application, and then proceed with eligibility, target population, grant categories, and allowable uses, performance measures, application attachments, program narrative, and budget. Toward the end of the presentation, you will be given additional resources and contact information. The CSG Justice Center has taken the time to carefully highlight key takeaways in blue, so as we go through the slides, those will be the key terms to note. We hope to give you lots of information for a successful application. Next slide. So a little bit about the JMHCP program. The goal of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program is to increase public safety through innovative cross-system collaboration for individuals with mental illness or co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders. The JMHCP is authorized by the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act and the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Reauthorization and Improvement Act. Next slide. The Justice and Mental Health Program is broad in terms of the types of programs and services it can support. It can provide services and treatment for people with mental health disorders and co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders throughout the criminal justice system, from first contact and community through the court and correctional process, and then on to reentry and community wraparound services. Program uses include providing appropriate services for system-involved individuals with mental illness, providing specialized training programs, improving law enforcement strategies to respond to individuals with mental illness, making diversion options available such as mental health courts, alternative prosecution and sentencing programs, pretrial service, or other court-based programs, providing transitional services for those with mental illness who are incarcerated or reentering the community from correctional institutions. Next slide. For review of the solicitation, you can link to this link that we've provided. To download the solicitation, use this link. The solicitation is your guide, as I mentioned, in addition to this PowerPoint and successfully submitting an application. Please read it cover to cover if you have to. We found that we've had to read it ourselves even a few times. So there's lots of information. It contains so much that it's hard to catch it all with a first read. So we encourage you to really read it through a few times. Next slide. Eligible applicants are limited to states, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribes as determined by the Secretary of the Interior, and tribal organizations. Proposed projects will be administered jointly by an agency with responsibility for criminal or juvenile justice activities and a mental health agency. Only one agency can apply in grants.gov. Applications must be submitted jointly as a collaborative program between criminal justice or juvenile justice and the mental health authority. If you refer to page 24 of the solicitation, you'll notice tribal organizations and descriptions of, or third parties proposing to provide direct services or assistance to residents on tribal lands should include in their applications a resolution, a letter, an affidavit, or other documentation as appropriate that certifies that the applicant has the legal authority from the tribes to implement the proposed project on tribal lands. In those instances, when an organization or consortium of tribes applies for a grant on behalf of a tribe or multiple specific tribes, the application should include appropriate legal documentation as described above from all tribes that would receive services or assistance under the grant. A consortium of tribes for which existing consortium bylaws allow action without support from all tribes in the consortium may submit instead a copy of its consortium bylaws with the application. So again, there's a lot of information there on tribes. I did read through it from the solicitation because it is so comprehensive, but I would encourage you to refer to page 24 on your solicitation. Next slide. Review of solicitation eligibility continued. A criminal or juvenile justice agency is an agency that is responsible for the detection, arrest, enforcement, prosecution, defense, adjudication, incarceration, probation, or parole relating to the violation of criminal laws of that state or local government. A mental health agency is an agency of state or local government or its contracted agency that is responsible for mental health services or co-occurring mental health and substance abuse services. A substance abuse agency is eligible to apply only if that agency provides services to individuals suffering from co-occurring mental health and substance abuse disorders. Next slide. Review of solicitation. So, a few bullets on the target population. We know that this population doesn't always arrive with a clear diagnosis, and that can be a challenge. Therefore, an allowable use of funds to help increase the use of screening and assessment tools at different intercept points within the CJ system. One of the first bullets under Category 1, implementation phase, reads, improve the administration of screening and/or assessment tools needed to identify mental disorders, substance use disorders, and criminogenic risk and needs among adults entering jail. You will notice that screening and assessment is a cornerstone to identifying the target population and mentioned throughout the solicitation. Next slide. This is a very unique grant opportunity, unlike any other, to address the needs of people with mental disorders and co-occurring mental substance use disorders. So we've got a mission and a legal obligation as well to keep it on track to address the needs of this particular population. So we do spend a little bit of time going through the target population and describing how to identify the target population. So it's really important to read that in the solicitation. Next slide. Grant categories. Grantees awarded Category 1 awards will demonstrate a commitment to system-level reduction in the prevalence of mental illness in jail. It's important to mention that all grantees must establish a team or utilize a pre-existing team of county leaders, stakeholders, and decision makers from multiple agencies to engage in the planning process. We know, and you know, that working with this population requires a tremendous amount of resources, time, and training that require the coordination of many agencies. The greatest chance for success requires not only the coordination of services, but also policy that drives consistent practice and expectations for staff to create better outcomes for people with mental disorders encountering the criminal justice system. Next slide. Grant categories continued. Understanding the flow of individuals into the grant-funded program from various referral sources to ensure the appropriate population will be served and target population enrollment numbers are met. Building capacity for implementation through activities such as securing operational space for program staff and clients, and also establishing memoranda of understanding or letters of agreement that outline how information will be shared between program partners or training program staff on the use of screening tools, program eligibility, and referral procedures. Next slide. And here we have Category 3, or otherwise known as expansion grant. An expansion covers a large area rather than read from the solicitation, and I'll let you do that. But I'll reference page 6 in the solicitation, where it begins to describe allowable uses and also say that these allowable uses may also apply to Category 2 if there is a significant need for additional planning activities. So the bold areas, or the takeaways here, are, next slide please, are training for criminal justice, mental health, and substance use treatment personnel, enhanced access to community-based health care services and coverage, law enforcement responses, also a priority consideration, diversion and alternative sentencing, correctional facility grants, community supervision strategies, case management, and direct services, as well as program evaluation. Next slide. Performance measures. Okay, so when you see the word must, and you can see it in the first paragraph there, here is my #1 tip for the presentation. When you see the word must, then reviewers must see it in the narrative, capabilities, and competency sections. And if I had a #2 tip, and I do, you may also want to link to these planning and implementation guides that we've provided that you'll be required to complete should you be awarded a grant. They will outline steps that need to be completed during the initial phases of the program. We had a lot of internal discussion about providing these tools, especially the planning and implementation guide, because sometimes they're considered a post-award tool. However, we all agreed that they are so extremely helpful in guiding you to cover many of the needed elements in the design and development of your program. So we all agreed in the end, you've got them now. You got the best outline here, and we are all about helping because we do want to work with you and we want you to have a successful application. Next slide. Okay, review of solicitation. So here's the other word, mandatory. This brings us right to the next part. Segue into mandatory parts of the application. And I forgot to mention that this is the other word, the other must. And yes, perhaps it's a bit silly, but hopefully you'll remember when you see the word must and you see the word mandatory, you'd be surprised what can happen to an otherwise great application when they're missing these essential parts to the application. Really important to take note. Next slide. Review of solicitation. And these are the attachments that are required. So in this list, these are the attachments that are required: the project timeline, position descriptions, letters of support or memorandum of understanding, statement of assurance form, applicant disclosure of pending applications, and research and evaluation independence and integrity statement. When you attach these documents in grants.gov, they will not show on the mandatory side of the application. However, I can assure you that they are extremely important to your application, and BJA does require that they are attached. If you have a great program and it scores very high by reviewers and we don't have the required attachments, it can affect your opportunity for grant award. So please, please complete them, label them as you see here, and attach. The label is also extremely important because if you do attach the required document but you don't label it and we are unable to identify it, it could have the same effect as if it weren't attached at all if we weren't able to identify it. So it's really important not only to attach it, but also to identify it with these labels. Next slide. So here we have more attachments. Also important to include your indirect cost rate agreement if applicable, and we'll get into the budget section in just a bit. Applicant disclosure of high-risk status, tribal authorizing resolution, and we talked about that just a little bit, but to refer you to page 24 of the solicitation for more information there. Financial management and system of internal control questionnaire. See page 27 of the solicitation for that required attachment. Next slide. Program narrative. Here, the only added comment I have is please number your pages, and if I may add, application number on your narrative is extremely helpful. Please place it at the top of the page or the footer or the header, anywhere that you like. I just love an application that is clearly identified. It's extremely helpful to have your application number somewhere on there. So the next part of the presentation has to do with developing your budget and budget categories, line items, calculations, and budget narrative. I'm going to hand it over to Nikisha Love, and we can then help with questions at the end and provide OCFO resources to help you. It is extremely critical to submit a budget that is allowable and within federal guidelines, or your program may be substantially delayed. Your budget is just as important as the rest of the application. It must be very clear and connected to your narrative. All the activities can be synthesized to cost in terms of personnel, contracted services, travel, equipment, and any indirect costs. So here's Nikisha to help you with some budget points. Nikisha?
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon. My name is Nikisha Love, and I am the State Policy Advisor here at BJA. I am the lead specialist for the Justice and Mental Health Program. We're going to review the section of the review of solicitation regarding the budget. Applicants must submit a budget detail worksheet and a budget narrative. Also, you should submit a budget summary, which summarizes all of the cost categories to let us know what will be spent for each category. All applicants must include your funding support for up to 4 staff, and that's to attend the Justice and Mental Health Conference. The conference we do every other year, and the grantee meetings, but you still must include those costs within your travel budget. For all applicants, additional travel costs should be included, as I said, to attend the meeting for the BJA conference. Any other travel outside of that, you would have to get prior approval on. So those are the most important travels that you should worry about for now. All applicants must set aside at least 5% of the budget in order to implement a data collection plan. The plan should be described in the program narrative under the selection criteria 4. See page 34 of the solicitation for additional information regarding that. Next slide, please. Okay. Review of solicitation. Match requirement. For all applicants, include the amount and source of match funding in the budget. Federal funds awarded under this program may not cover more than 80% of the total cost of the project being funded, the applicant must identify the source of the 20% non-federal portion of the total project cost and how match funds will be used. See page 17 in the solicitation. And please make sure that you actually look at the calculations when you're doing the match, because we've noticed in past awards or past applications that applicants assume that 20% is just the base. You have to do the 80% first, then you do the additional 20 to know exactly how much match you are required to submit. And match can be in kind or cash. You just need to specify which one and how it will be used. Next slide, please. Review of solicitation for the budget. Indirect cost agreements. Your indirect cost rate agreements, in absence of a federal approved indirect cost rate agreement, applicants can elect to use up to 10%, and that would be related to admin costs. So if you don't have approved indirect cost rate agreement and you want to use admin, you can use only up to 10%. Please refer to page 23 of the solicitation, additional information, or to section 3.11 of the 2015 OJP financial guide. And I really stress that you please use the financial guide. It's a very helpful tool when you are submitting your budget. It really helps you with costs that are allowable and costs that are unallowable. Next slide, please. Review of solicitation for the budget, subcontracting and pass-through funding. Individuals listed under the personnel section of the budget worksheet should be employees of the organization only, and not contractors or subcontractors. Salaries, compensation, and travel included to conference for subcontractors, contractors should be listed under consultant contracts category and not under travel costs for personnel of the organization. Travel to conferences, should include minimally one person from the awarding agency, which is the point of contact, and not solely attendance by the subcontractors or the contractors. And this is because as the awarding agency, you need to identify who or elect who will be the main point of contact, and they need to be responsible for overseeing. Once you all decide to give out subawards, that person will be responsible for the oversee of how programs are being implemented, because that's who they will have to report to me, and not just myself, but to Veronica Munson, who is also a BJA program advisor. Next slide, please. Review of solicitations, the budget. Unallowable uses. Generally, food and beverages cannot be included in these awards unless prior approval has been attained through the funding agency. Additionally, monetary incentives, gift cards, and other client stipends are considered unallowable costs for this grant. Next slide, please. Review of solicitation in the budget resources. Here you can find a sample budget worksheet that will help you determine, what a budget should look like, what it should contain. And also, like I said, please use the OJP financial guide. It is a very resourceful tool to help you be able to submit a good detailed budget on what costs are allowable and what costs are not allowable. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Maria.
Thank you, Nikisha. Okay, so here we are at the point in the presentation where we're going to talk about how to apply. You will first need a few registrations in a few separate places. I sometimes think we should reverse the presentation and put first things first, because these federal registrations are truly the first steps in the process, and grants.gov is one. Next slide. So the next slide here is the helpline for grants.gov. And a note on grants.gov. where it states during this process, and basically they're referring to the grant application process. It's in a way a bit misleading. Grants.gov is really there to assist with technical needs in applying, as in perhaps an attachment won't upload or a field is not displaying correctly, something to do with the actual submission process. So it's really important to note that part and that role of grants.gov help. Next slide. Additional application information. So the next federal registration is SAM registration, and it's the next critical step in this process. It's important to note that it can take a little while, so it shouldn't be done the day you plan to submit your application. The important thing to remember about these registrations is to keep them current throughout the life of your grant program should you be awarded. And for sure, your grants manager of your program or your financial advisor knows how important it is in order to be able to draw down and other activities to keep these registrations current. It's really critical. Next slide. Okay. So additional important information. While BJA anticipates making 30 grant awards across all 3 categories in fiscal year 16, no budget appropriations have been confirmed yet. The exact number of awards and funding will not be determined until a final appropriation is made. The deadline is May 17th, 2016. Okay, so one more note on grants.gov. So it's really important that you don't wait until the day it's due when you submit in grants.gov. And one of the reasons it's so important is because, of course, the day that it's due, there's usually a lot of people that need help, but it also is very difficult to fix problems quickly. Give yourselves the advantage. If possible, if you could give yourselves 24 to 48 hours to account for information perhaps improperly entered or system issues. We know from experience that if something's going to go wrong with a great program and a great application, it'll happen on May 17th. So please submit early. Next slide. And one more note about resources. We have provided a lot of resources in this webinar, and I really encourage you to take advantage. The solicitation, of course, like I said, read it cover to cover, read it a few times. I had to. I've been looking at it pretty much daily now for a few weeks, and I still cannot just go ahead and put my finger on exactly where a particular piece of information is. There's so much in there. Read it a few times. Planning and implementation guides, again, that will help you to design a really strong narrative, help you design really strong capabilities and competencies. We had discussion about even providing it because it's a post-award tool, but we believe it will really help you. Okay, more resources. At the top, we have a little more information about JMHCP if you would like to read more about the program. The next number is the OCFO number, which is the fiscal helpline. This is the helpline that can answer questions. If you're having a lot of budget questions, I cannot urge you enough. If you are stuck on a budget question and you've brought it to the attention of your budget guru, your best friend, the financial officer, or someone in your department or division, you know, you've let somebody else sort of critique your budget and you still got questions, then call the 1-800 number. It's advised that you consult the 2015 Federal Financial Guide. Again, get with your best friend, the financial officer, and consult with OCFO to ensure that your budget is A-OK. And when I say A-OK, I mean allowable and reasonable and makes sense for your objectives. We don't want you to have any hiccups when you're awarded this great grant. So make sure calculations are clear, costs are explained. we want you to have the funds in place at the time when you need them and have a successful launch. Okay, next slide. Questions. Okay, so as I mentioned, grants.gov, that helpline is for the technical submission of your application, and the NCJRS, the National Criminal Justice Referral Service, or Response Center, they are the programmatic helpline. So when you have questions about your objectives, or if something might be allowable, or you just, I couldn't even provide all the examples. I mean, we get lots of questions through NCJRS. They're the ones that you would call, and they field all the questions. They collect all the questions every year, so most likely they're going to have an answer for you because they keep a database of questions, and then they also pass them on to us here at BJA. So I'm pretty confident that they can answer almost all of your questions. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to Jerry Murphy and Cynthia Kimmelman-DeVries, and just want to say thank you very much and wish you the best of luck on your application.
Jerry, you're up. Make sure to unmute your phone. Jerry? Jerry? Nope. Jerry, we're going to take it over from this side.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Worsberg. I'm a Grantee Technical Assistance Manager at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. The Council of State Governments is a nonprofit, bipartisan policy solution organization dedicated. We're a nonprofit. We have grants-based components for the Council of State Government. We work with all three branches of government, and we are a membership association. The three major projects that we have include behavioral health, which includes criminal justice and mental health, thinking of ways to improve responses to people with mental illness who are in contact with the Criminal Justice Center, as well as people with co-occurring substance use and mental disorders. The National Reentry Resource Center. We provide training and technical assistance to Second Chance Act grantees through that mechanism, focused on reentry. Additionally, the third piece of our work includes justice reinvestment. The goal of justice reinvestment is to increase public safety and reduce money on spending on corrections and improve conditions in high-stakes neighborhoods with disproportionate funding. To learn more about the Council of State Governments Justice Center, please go to our website at csgjusticecenter.org/mental health.
Thanks so much, Sarah. My name is Lucia Kimmelman, and I'm here representing a team of technical assistance coordinators who work in the Justice Center's Behavioral Health Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do here at the Justice Center. And we tell you a little bit about the assistance that we provide to you over the course of a grant that you may receive under the JMHCP grant program. Before we start our question and answer session, we'd like to give you, just generally, like I said, a short introduction of the Council of State Governments in general, should you actually be awarded this grant. In addition to what Sarah had explained above about our three dedicated areas of work, I wanted to provide you with our role as it pertains to the grant program and make a distinction between us and BJA, your funder, who oversees the grant management, selection, awarding, and maintenance of the individual grants. BJA contracts with outside agencies to provide deeper technical and content expertise in these areas that the programs are implementing during the time that you are planning and implementing these initiatives. And like you, the Council of State Governments Justice Center has applied for a grant through BJA to provide the JMHCP grantees with this content and technical expertise. We are excited to have been selected as the sole technical assistance provider for not only this grant, JMHCP, but also for the Second Chance Act grant program, since both of their inceptions in 2004 and 2006, respectively. Combined between these two grant programs, we've worked with over 350 JMHCP grant awardees and over 700 SCA grant awards for over 1,000 different individual grant programs. On your screen now is an example of our main mental health page. I urge you to take a look at the website, sign up for our newsletter in the upper right-hand corner of any of the pages, and explore the vast number of resources it contains for you to get information. Once applications are accepted by BJA and awards are made, we work with BJA to assign you a technical assistance coordinator. Your TA coordinator will work with you over the course of your grant and can do a number of things for you. Off-site technical assistance includes regular phone calls, check-ins, and emails we will have with you and your key stakeholders or partners, usually on a monthly basis. We also have resources to conduct a limited number of in-person visits to those grantees that have a situation that would benefit from an in-person consultation by Justice Center staff, along with a content expert. Another thing we do is connect you with resources such as research findings and practical tools, and experts such as researchers and practitioners who can help you resolve challenges you face in meeting your goals. Through the multiple technical assistance programs that we manage, we're also able to connect you to individuals and programs that are in your shoes right now or who are implementing programs similar to yours. Our National Criminal Justice Initiative map, accessible to you now on our website and before you apply, and a little screen capture on the bottom left of the slide in front of you, allows you to search by programs funded not only under JMHCP and the Second Chance Act grant programs, but other grant programs funded by the Department of Justice, Labor, Education, and Health and Human Services. In addition to the resources I've just mentioned, the Justice Center website has a vast library of written research documents, practitioner guides, as well as distance learning opportunities, some of which are displayed on your screen right now. All of these documents are free and downloadable from our website. We also conduct a series of webinars over the course of the year, one approximately every month on topics that have been requested by JMHCP grantees. There's also an archive of previously conducted webinars on a variety of topics that can be found on our website under the resources heading that appears in the middle of the page and can be viewed at any time. And lastly, as Nikisha has mentioned and Maria has mentioned in their slide presentation, once awarded a grant, all JMHCP grantees are invited to an orientation and conference in the Washington, D.C. area. This is an excellent and important event. Experts from the field will be presenting. There will be work sessions conducted by Justice Center staff as well as national speakers and academicians. You will have the opportunity to meet with your technical assistance coordinator in person, staff from BJA, and network with your peers from around the country. I hope that this has been helpful in giving you examples of what technical assistance looks like from the Justice Center, as well as examples of things that you can expect once you receive a grant award. At the end of the presentation, we'll display all of our contact information. Please feel free to email the appropriate person for additional information, either the BJA staff for more fiscal and grant-related management issues, or either myself or Jerry Murphy as it pertains to technical assistance issues. As a reminder, we will be emailing out these slides shortly, as well as posting a link to the recording on our webinar page in an archive form. So everybody who is registered for the event will be receiving a link shortly in the next week or so, bringing you to your website where you can hear the webinar and you can also download the slides as well. We're now going to begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, please type the question into the Q&A panel, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'll be moderating the questions coming in from participants, and we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the time remaining. Again, if we run out of time, please do email one of us using the information provided on the screen. Okay, we have about 25 or 26 different questions that have come in. I'm going to pretty much start going through them and assign them to folks. Nikisha and Maria, if you can please make sure that your phone is unmuted so we can go ahead and begin. And just give me a shout out when you've done that. We're unmuted. Excellent, thank you so much. it looks like the first question, there's actually a couple of grantees that it seems like that are on the phone that have had grants before that are listening. Welcome to you guys. And the question pertaining to them is, can an agency that's already had a JMHCP expansion grant apply for another? And then sort of in addition to that question is, can they duplicate the program they've created before, or would it have to be a new program? So basically, two-part question. Number one, can you apply again for the same category of grant you may have received already? And then if you do apply again, does it have to be a brand new program, or could it basically essentially be the same program that they've applied for before? Maria, do you want to take a stab at that, and then I can add my thoughts too?
Sure, that would be fine. Yes, you can apply for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program more than once. You're not required to make changes. If you're doing something that is working well and it's serving the target population, there is no requirement there that you should change the program. And you can apply more than once. And I think the most important thing is your kind of your history as far as how you serve, how well did you do. We take a lot of those things into account. And did you use the funding as you said you were going to use the funding? Did you engage TA, technical assistance? I mean, those are the kinds of questions that we're going to look at more than if you've applied before or if it's a similar program.
And I would add that I think from a scoring perspective for the scorers, not that technically we are the scorers, but I would say that applications that are either layering on an expansion of the services that you may have originally been doing, or expanding your target population, or something else that's slightly different from what you may have been doing before would also be very attractive. Maria, let me know if I've misspoken.
No, I think, I think it's probably, reviewers, we have independent peer reviewers from the field that review the grants and score them. And then we would look at a number of factors and criteria when weighing whether or not a program would be funded again for the same activities. I mean, there's just a number of criteria that would come into play. I think it would strengthen your application if you perhaps maybe you expanded in one area and then you were able to sort of build on that success.
Great, thank you so much. Okay. Easy question, what's the amount of funding identified to be awarded for this year's application? $7.5 million, no, $7.25 million, $7,250,000, sorry, yes, that's what I just said. And just referencing back to one of the slides, BJA anticipates that being about 30 grantees that are awarded this year, about 6 of them under Category 1 grantees. Okay, I think this is a collective question that Nikisha or Maria, you can answer. The application instructions say that this should be a joint venture between a criminal or juvenile justice agency and a mental health agency. Can a state's prison system function as both, with the collaboration being between custody and mental health?
So a state prison has a mental health entity that is perhaps contracted with the state prison facility. Yes, I don't know if it has to be independent of the state facility. Like I'm probably overcomplicating it. I don't think so. I think I'd have to go back and perhaps refer to the legislation itself, but to get a little more detail about that. But it's primarily for a state prison, whoever their mental health authority is that they work with, that in and of itself is a collaboration between a criminal justice entity and a mental health authority. As far as, you know, how the contracts are run, I don't really think that has a lot of bearing. I think if you're speaking about collaboration, then you know, I think if you have a mental health authority that you work with, then that relationship's in place.
Is that what they're saying, Cynthia, or are they saying that it's in the same entity?
I am guessing, and this might be a question that we need to follow up with afterwards. I do have the individual who's asked it. If you're able to respond back to that question, we can come back around to it. But I'm guessing that it's within the same entity, within the same facility is what I'm guessing. But I'm going to flag that for further follow-up, and we can reach out to the participant who asked that question.
Okay. Yeah, that will work.
Thank you.
Sure. So this is a question that actually, if you're not paying attention, pay attention right now for all of the participants, because this is a question about the planning and implementation guide. There's another question that's going to come in a little bit about it that I'll get to in a second. But just generally speaking, the P&I guide link is in the grant announcement, and unfortunately, the link that's in the grant announcement is incorrect. It is taking you to an older version of the P&I guide, unfortunately, that is no longer in use. On the resources page of this slide presentation, which is one of the later pages, I can look that up for you, but on the additional resources page, there is a link to the P&I guides on the Justice Center's website. Please use that link for the P&I guides. That is correct. And it will show you a link to the P&I guides not just for Category 1, but for also Categories 2 and 3. So the proper link is listed in this slide presentation, but not in the solicitation, just to make that clear for everybody. And it's on slide number 31.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Sure. Okay, I think this is a Nikisha question, I think. If there are sub-grantees to a collaborative application, do you need statements of assurances from each sub-agency?
No, just from the applicant.
Just from the applicant. Okie doke. Thank you. There are two questions about this application number. Is the application number referring to the grants.gov number assigned to the solicitation? So I believe that that's number 2016-9205. Or what do you mean by application number? Are you referring to the CFDA on the solicitation? So I guess that's the same question. I think you guys referred to a couple of times the application number, so I think that's what it's referring to, or is there another number?
There's an application number that identifies the applicant by state. I don't know if that's generated by grants.gov.
Okay. I'm going to say for most intents and purposes on page 2, it says grants.gov number assigned to this announcement is BJA 2016-9205.
Okay.
Is what you were probably referring to?
Okay. Then that was it.
Okay. Okie doke. Give me a second to mark these. And just an FYI for anybody who's asked questions, if you feel like you need to follow up on a part 2 of that question, please do go ahead and reach out to us, and we can do a part 2 of that. Okay, I think this is a good introduction to a second webinar that we're going to be having next week. If you are a law enforcement agency, we are going to be hosting a second webinar next Wednesday, April 20th at the exact same time at 2 p.m. You can get to that registration link off of our website. It's on the front page of our website as well as on the mental health pages. That's specific to law enforcement agencies, but let me ask this question now anyway, but this is one of the things we'll be exploring a little bit further next week as well. If the law enforcement agency and the mental health agency are both county departments, can personnel be in either of these departments?
Can you repeat that again, Cynthia?
Yeah. If the law enforcement agency and mental health agency are both county departments, can personnel be in either of these departments? I'm thinking yes.
Yes, but one applicant.
Yeah, but it's based off the applicant. So let's just say state that the county is the one who is applying. But if they're going to give it to their sub-agency, right, gotcha, which is the law enforcement, yes, because they're still considered county employees.
Yes.
Right. So yes, it would all go on personnel.
Some of these questions I feel like get a little bit technical in nature and are very specific to individual situations. If it's feeling also, just another option for folks, if it's feeling like you're not sure that you understand the answer or your question wasn't answered, our contact information is on the screen. Please go ahead and email Maria, me, and Nikisha together, and we'll try and get you the answer, or one of the three of us. It doesn't matter. It will all get routed to the right place. Okay, this is a MASH question, Nikisha, just to verify, and I think that this is not correct. Only 80% of the grant will be funded. Remaining 20% must be verified as approved in order to qualify for the 80%?
No.
That's what I thought. 100% of the grant is funded, and you need to match 20% of the total amount that you are proposing from an outside agency.
Correct.
Right. So if
right,
your grant,
we're given the 100. Well, yeah, we're given the 100%. It looks like 80-20 because
it's basically 80% federal. The split is 80% federal and 20% from another state, local, county, or in-kind service. You can't match federal with federal, but so it's an 80-20 split. 80% is federal, 20% is match, and the total budget is the federal and the match combined, which equals 100% of the program.
Right, which means that, like we state, that we will give, you know, depending on the category, up to whatever amount. So if they know that they actually want 300, they can only get the 250 from us, and the other percentage will have to come, you know, from their resources.
Right. Page 17 of the solicitation has some really excellent examples for all three grant categories. So, for example, if you want $250,000 from BJA, that means that you have to come up with a $62,500 match on top of that. So it's 20% of your $250,000.
Right.
Yeah, that gets added on top of.
Correct. And like I said, on page 17 and page 18, there are really good examples of what that math looks like.
Right.
Can separate applications be submitted for two projects, Category 2 and Category 3? I'm assuming you mean from the same agency, so you'd like to submit for a P&I grant and an expansion grant. Assuming that those are two separate projects, meaning that you are implementing something for planning and expanding on something else for expansion, I'm going to say yes.
Yes.
Yep. I think that if you're talking about planning and implementing something and then also having it be under expansion, no, if it's not obviously two unique different programs.
If they're expanding on a program that's already existing, they can do that. And if they're coming in for something new for the planning and implementation, yes.
I'm going to have a follow-up question similar to that. This is a general question I'm not entirely sure how to answer, so I'm going to ask it, but then please do follow up with us if we can't answer this correctly. Are certain types of organizations and or services excluded from this grant opportunity? Maria, Nikisha, I don't know if there's anything off the top of your head that you could think of. Nothing's coming to mind for me right now.
Okay, one more time, Cynthia, just a little bit slower.
Sure. So, I'm sorry. Are certain types of organizations and or services excluded from this grant opportunity?
Okay, so I think what they're asking about is the eligibility. So it's, you know, government entities, state, local, county, tribal, you know, that's the eligibility. Those are the eligible applicants. You know, nonprofits are not eligible. So if that's kind of where the question's going.
Yeah, so
you can always partner. You can always partner and also definitely consider, you know, nonprofit entities as far as the services they're providing as in-kind match, faith community, in-kind match. You know, you can definitely ramp up your program, but you can't be an applicant.
Okay. This is a similar, same kind of umbrella type of question. We're going to probably exhaust every angle of this. Can a county submit more than one application if each is made through a separate division, such as the Office of Sheriff and then another by the Office of Mental Health? And assuming that this is two separate projects and that you're not trying to put in an application for the exact same service through the Office of the Sheriff and then through the Office of Mental Health, meaning doubling your chances, but you have two separate projects, then I would say yes. Anything else you would add to that?
I think you're spot on, Cynthia. They can apply. They're both eligible. They would have to be two separate projects. And two, yes.
Serving two separate purposes. Like they can't submit a duplicate application.
Right. Like if we saw same goals and objectives, I mean, that would send up a red flag.
Okay. I can take this one. Does the planning and implementation guide require approval from CSG and working with CSG staff to implement?
Yes, it does. Please don't be scared by that. It's going to actually be the framework for a lot of your technical assistance phone calls that you're going to have with your TA coordinator. By no means are you expected to fill it out all at once, so if you do go to our website and take a look at it, please don't be alarmed by the length. It's basically an exercise and tool that we use to walk you through the planning and implementation of your program. And while there are some things that are in it and questions that we have that may or may not be 100% relevant to the goals that you're trying to deliver or implement in the grant program, it's basically to structure some wishful thinking that we would like you to get to in terms of certain priorities that BJA has set for the field in general, and that we think is just good business practice when you're implementing these types of programs, meaning partnerships between criminal justice and mental health. And then just a note that it's really excellent, as Maria had mentioned, as you're thinking through the themes in your application that you think are important and that were mentioned in the application. So some of the different types of evidence-based practices, some of the other things that Maria has gone through or that are listed in the application are directly addressed in the P&I guide. So if you're not sure you understand what assertive community treatment means or the emphasis on co-occurring disorders, the P&I guide will give you some additional references around that and support around thinking through some of those things. And you'll also have an idea of what we're going to be working with you on during the life of your grant. Okay. Nikisha, I think this is a you question. What's the definition of in-kind in the matching fund section? Can you please provide examples?
For the in-kind?
Yep.
It could be personnel. It could be use of personnel, staff, office space, anything that is reasonable.
Yep, it has to be basically, if it's federally allowable, like if you could put that item in your budget as an allowable, a federally allowable cost, then it's allowable, the same rules apply to match. So if you are, you know, if, for example, one item that is not federally allowable, if you go to the federal financial guide, vehicles are not federally allowable, purchase and things like that. So, you know, someone couldn't give you a vehicle for your program and use the cost of that vehicle for in-kind match because it's not federally allowable anyway. So it has to, in-kind match has to be federally allowable. It's something that a service or a product or a donation that you would otherwise have to go out and pay for in order to operationalize your program, but somebody donates or gives it to you, and then you can take the cost of that item or service that you would otherwise have to go pay for, and you can use the cost as part of your budget, as part of your match.
Great. As far as application agencies, question on your definition of eligible applicants. Your slides define the criminal justice organization. Can state administering agencies apply?
SAAs, yes. If it's a yes, because it's a state agency. So eligibility is state, local, tribal, government entities. If the SAA is a state agency, I mean, I'm assuming that it is. Most of the time it is. The state administering agency is a state agency, but it would fall back to that state, local, county, tribal eligibility criteria.
Okay. Similar kind of question. I'm going to take the first stab of this, Maria. You'll know where my answer is going. And then I'm going to also recommend that this person, if you have questions, can contact us offline. An eligible applicant can be a state but the project must be administered jointly by the criminal justice agency and the mental health agency, correct? Are the criminal justice mental health agencies involved in direct service with the target population? So the answer to that might be maybe. It depends on what your initiative is trying to actually accomplish. We often have, and you had a slide that Nikisha had presented around pass-through agencies and subcontracting and contracting. It might be, for example, that you have an office of the court applying, that is a county or state level agency that will then be subcontracting all of the direct service work to another third party that administers services for your court. It might be that you're a mental health authority that doesn't provide direct services, but that you contract with a small nonprofit that actually does those services. That could be the agency that provides the direct service to that population. So the answer is maybe. It depends on the structure that you're trying to implement, but no, they don't necessarily have to be providing the direct service work.
That's correct.
Okay. I think we answered this already, but just in case we hadn't, if there are sub-grantees to a collaborative application, do you need statements of assurances from each sub-agency?
I think we did answer that. It's the applicant agency must submit letters of assurance.
But not the sub-agencies?
No, because the applicant is the one applying for the grant.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right. The authorizing official is ultimately responsible.
Okay. Is the budget detail worksheet sample a form that we can actually use to submit our budget, or is it provided as an example on how the budget should be put together?
Say that again, Cynthia. Actual form.
Is the budget detail worksheet just a sample, or can they actually use that to put their budget together?
Oh, they can actually use that to put their budget together. It's not a mandatory form. It's just the outlay of what your budget should look like and what it should contain.
Great. I'm going to ask the next question. I think this is a former grantee asking this, in which case I need to direct you to the change in the application. I think this is what this is referring to, or I could be wrong. But for planning grants, are we permitted to conduct cross-systems training to enhance collaboration and understanding of mental health system and CJ system? If you've not looked at the solicitation recently very directly, there's no longer a $50,000 one-year planning grant. That grant has gone away. That is a new type of category that is a county-based grant that looks very, very different than what historically JMHCP has funded under Category 1. If that's still a question after you've read the solicitation, please do reach out to us directly. If you're talking about the new Category 1 grant, yes, training can be involved, but that is not really the focus of the Category 1 grants at this time. Okay. Can can a public criminal justice agency partner with a nonprofit mental health agency such as county?
So you're talking to public criminal justice agency?
Can a public criminal justice agency partner with a nonprofit mental health agency?
So, well, you have criminal justice and partnering with a mental health, but who would be the, I guess the applicant would have to come from either the state, local, county, tribal, criminal justice agency. I don't know if public is state, county, local. It has to be a government entity. Or the applicant can be like a state mental health authority, or county. It has to be a government entity. Subcontracts could be with nonprofits. Hope that answers.
Going along the same line, I think I understand where this is going, but maybe someone else can help me out here. Can an independent professional, I'm thinking like a licensed clinician, psychiatrist, or somebody, collaborate with an organization to apply for this grant?
If the organization.
Yes, back to applicant, who is the eligible applicant agency? That again, go back to the same state, county, local, tribal. It has to be a government entity. I think we're talking about contractual services here. If an independent, private, licensed clinician is subcontracted for that government entity, that's the applicant agency, that's fine. That's totally allowable. It would go under contractual costs, and there would be a contract attached to the application. And however that state entity bids out contracts or solicits for contracts, however that process, that would fall within the government, the policy or legislation of this administering agency, the government agency.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question that one of my colleagues is here to help answer. Is there any overlap between this grant and the Stepping Up Initiative grant? Can a county be eligible for both? If you guys are not familiar with the Stepping Up Initiative, shameless plug, please do go to the main page of our website because you'll see a lot of information about it, and we're having a very exciting meeting that's happening next week on Monday and Tuesday. Will, one of our TA coordinators who's doing the technical assistance for the county grants, can help answer that question.
Hey, thanks, Cynthia. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say well, just for me, I think just the overlap is in the people that you serve, and the mission is to definitely improve and grow responses to people with mental illness and people with mental disorders and co-occurring mental and substance abuse disorders, and the Stepping Up Initiative definitely has done just that. So,
yep.
That's all I just wanted to add.
Yep. Yeah, just to add to that, they're not explicitly part of the same initiative, but as Maria was saying, they're addressing the same issues, and we definitely encourage folks that are Category 1 grantees to also participate in Stepping Up, and the current Category 1 grantees, several are also participating in Stepping Up. So as Maria was saying, they're addressing the same goals, but slightly different initiatives.
And you'll get to work with our fabulous team on both of those initiatives. So if you are a County 1 grantee, you will probably touch all the folks that are working on Stepping Up.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I really like the next question. It has the enthusiasm is pouring out of the screen. For Category 3 grants, would we be able to jump right in and start using the funds for operations, and how would that work? Pretty much yes. As soon as your budget is cleared by BJA, you pretty much could start drawing down funds to start your program operations. For expansion grants in particular, I think that's probably a very common scenario because the assumption is that you already have a program that's up and running and that you're layering on something new, so you don't have a lot of the planning time that you'll see in P&I grants. Not sure, Nikisha, if you wanted to answer anything else there.
No.
Okay, are there other target population criteria other than COD and nonviolent offenses? I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else that limits.
Serves adults and juveniles.
Yep.
Adults and juveniles, screening and assessment tools.
Although that's not really target population necessarily.
It's needed to identify. Other than that, it's nonviolent, and I would say that, I don't know if I should bring this up because sometimes it can get a little convoluted, but that would default to state statute.
I'll help you out there and say also that we can also, if you need more specific information about what the nonviolent offense criteria is, we have that in writing that we can send to anyone that's interested. That's probably one of the most common questions. But you should also pay attention to that slide in the presentation because it also does emphasize that the nonviolent criteria applies only to the current charge or offense that the person is coming in on and does not include past criminal history.
Right.
That's important.
It is. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Maria, I'll let you answer this question. Is it possible to get more lead time from the announcement to when it is due for submission in the future? Our state has multiple layers for the approval process to apply. The 50 or so days does not afford the required time for us.
So they're asking about the submission time frame and
can it be extended?
Unfortunately not. It cannot be. The hard deadline is 11:59 on May 17th.
Yep. Somebody was also asking about next week's webinar. What we can do as far as the link, they're wondering if probation departments count under the law enforcement agency for the purpose of next week's webinar. Not so much. I don't know that that's totally 100% accurate of a fit. We're talking more about programs that are partnering around specific, like very early intercept out in the system in the community, for example, not necessarily in terms of reentry probation. Although I would say that we encourage anybody to attend, and if it feels like the subject matter that we're talking about up front it doesn't fit you, then you can drop off early. I'm going to send out, when we send out the link to the slides, we'll send out a link to the registration for next week's webinar. If we don't get the slide and the recording up and running before then, I'll make sure that we can figure out a way to send out the link to everybody just in advance, just with that link so that you have it. This is a similar question to the nonviolent offense criteria. I think the answer to this is yes, but just double checking someone other than me. Can offenders with violent governing offenses who have already served their prison sentences be included in grant-funded programs? And I think that I answered that before with if it's a previous historical violent offense, that doesn't actually preclude you from being served under the program currently.
That's correct.
I think that this is a redo of a similar earlier question. Within our state prison system, mental health is part of the prison system, not a contract service. Can the collaboration be between custody services and the mental health department? I think that's clarification of the question we had earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to explore that offline?
I would like to explore that offline because I have a knee-jerk reaction, but I'd rather do a little more exploring and provide a definite answer on that.
Okay. If the person who asked that question, thank you for your diligence in asking it, reframing it twice. If you can contact one of us, and we can be more than happy to have a conversation with you about it. Okay. I think this is both a Nikisha and Maria question. I have a contractee who wants us to contract with them, NAMI, and then they will pay their affiliates to be guest speakers at various trainings. Is this allowable?
Repeat that one more time.
Yep, because I think so. I have a contractee who wants us to contract with them, NAMI, and then they will pay their affiliates to be guest speakers at various trainings. Is this allowable?
Now, when you're you're saying they're guest speakers, so it's not no one who is an employee of the NAMI.
Yes.
The contractor is contractor.
Let's see if I can make this a little bit more specific of an example. I think I can get this. So maybe I'm a mental health agency. I'm the main mental health partner here on the grant. I work with my local NAMI affiliate. I'm going to have trainings for cross-systems training for my employees in criminal justice. NAMI has their own local affiliate guest speakers that they use in my community, and they will pay them to come speak at my trainings. I don't see why that would not be allowable. I think that that would work. My contract would be with NAMI, and however NAMI would want to use those funds, if it means to pay their volunteers or compensate their speakers, I think that seems like that would be fine. Does that make sense?
I think it's how the budget is set up. Right, it's how the budget is set up when they're doing their contracting, and as long as it is applicable to the grant program, right, that would not be a problem. But see, the thing is the
expenses have to be used for that purpose.
For that purpose, it would have to be used for the purpose of this grant solely. Mm-hmm. And they would have to provide justification of, what type of training. So it depends on what the budget looks like. It's easier, to try to answer, but we would have to actually see it before I can give a definite answer.
Okay.
You can contract services. You can contract services, of course, including training. That's allowable. If you contract with NAMI, that's allowable. And then the rest gets a little convoluted as far as how NAMI brings in their trainers, and then where the money is, and we'd have to follow that and make sure that it provides for this program.
Okay. So is that a post-grant award question, or is that a before you submit your budget, let's make sure that this is correct question?
I would, I would set it up the way you think it needs to happen, and then I would run it past your financial officer and let them critique it, and then I would look at the financial guide, and then I would call OCFO.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And again, I just wanted to remind folks that we'd be happy to answer questions offline with very specific scenarios if that's easier, so that the way that you submit things is submitted properly before you get to the post-award aspect of things. Just wanted to give everybody a heads up that's listening. I am getting towards the end of questions, so if you still have a lingering question that you haven't had answered yet, please do go ahead and submit that through the chat box if there's still something that you're unclear or unsure of. Okay. This is about pass-throughs and sole sources. So I think, Nikisha, is there a plan for the grantee, if there's a plan for the grantee to be a pass-through and award a service provider, is the expectation that a competitive solicitation be completed, or can sole sources be considered?
Now, you're talking about for the pass-through?
Yep. So when the pass-through awards the funding to a subcontractor, can it be a sole source, or does there have to be a competitive solicitation?
It depends on the amount. If it's over a certain dollar amount, it has to be, they would have to file for, if it's a certain dollar amount, that we would consider sole source. And I think that's about, what is it, 200, used to be over $150,000. I think it has increased over the years, right? That would be, they would have to, if they're using one particular agency or sub-awardee that they wanted to use, depending on the dollar amount. But it's also how their procurement is done. What is their procurement process? They will have to follow their procurement process.
Is there, assuming that their procurement process means that they can do a sole source and they don't have to compete it, is there the specific dollar amount, is that mentioned in the OJP financial guide, or is there somewhere else that they can look that information up? Okay.
Yes, it's in the financial guide.
Okay, and I'm assuming it'll be under some, just thinking about how they find it in the financial guide, would it be something under subcontracting? Would it be like cost-based? Okay.
Yeah, it'll be under subcontracting. It should be also a tab for sole source as well.
Okay, terrific. Okay, this is an interesting question. I don't know the answer to this. If we have a van that we use to provide services to the target population, can we use our maintenance of the vehicle as our match?
The mileage, the gas mileage, I believe, is reimbursable. Maintenance, I think, that's really hard to justify because it has to be. You have to attribute it to that program and that trip. Right. Like, how do you perform maintenance on a vehicle and then say, this oil change was specific to this program? It's very difficult to do. I would steer away from that.
Not saying that it's a definite no, but that the actual vehicle will have to serve for purposes only.
That program.
For the program.
Only.
Only.
In order for maintenance to be allowed.
Yeah, in order for maintenance to be an upkeep, for them to want to request funds for that.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Okay. I only have a couple more questions left, so I'm just pointing that out to folks. So again, one more time, if you have any last-minute burning desire questions, please go ahead and include them, which is perfect because we're coming just to 3:30. Can you partner with a nonprofit such as NAMI? As long as you have the state agency as your primary applicant who's submitting the application, I would say yes. Mm-hmm. And then our last question, should expansion grant applications attach a planning and implementation guide and timeline? No, do not attach a planning and implementation guide. Please don't do all of that work. And yes, please do attach a timeline. That is one of the additional attachments that was on the slide that Maria had mentioned. So please do include a timeline. No, you do not have to include a P&I guide. That's something that you're going to be doing once you get awarded the grant with your technical assistance coordinator. Please review the P&I guide because I think it's very helpful just in terms of planning initiatives and developing them. That's great, but absolutely not. You do not need to do that in advance. The only other thing that I wanted to clarify really quickly, just as far as the budget, I wasn't sure if this was confusing. Nikisha, you had mentioned that the conference happens every other year, and there's an orientation that happens for every grantee every year, but please do still follow the budget requirements that you need to put in a budget for both events. So 2 separate events. It doesn't matter what year they occur in. You can put it in year 1, you can put it in year 2, but you have to make sure that you budget for 2 events with up to 4 people attending. You can refer back to that slide. It's also within the application itself as well, but I just wanted to let you know that the timing of those events doesn't actually really matter to how you prepare your budget as long as you include 2 separate events with an appropriate number of people. Anything else that we want to add? Anything else we haven't covered? Maria and Nikisha?
think we've covered everything. I had one comment. I think it was a question referring to probation and parole. And of course, they can absolutely attend the webinar next week, whether or not, it's going to be more helpful than this, or I think, more information is better than less. But also, as far as probation goes, it's kind of their function and role is different state by state. Some it falls under courts, some it falls under corrections. So it really depends. I would just say look at how probation and parole is organized, or how probation is organized in your state, and I would just encourage you, if you feel like you need to attend the webinar, to do so.
Absolutely, and I was going to say, you can, like I had said, you can always drop off if it doesn't feel like it is appropriate to what we're discussing. And you can find information about all of that from our website, which is on the top of your screen right now, and the link to it, csgjusticecenter.org, mental health under resources and webinars. The information will be there. We're also I'm going to attempt to send out an email link to everybody that's attending with just the registration link for the law enforcement webinar next week. And just a very fast question that just came up really quickly. I had gone over that the TMI guide link in the solicitation is incorrect. You will find the correct link on the resources tab in this slide presentation. And I think that that's everything. And like I said, once again, please do email one of us in case you have any additional questions that were not answered or need clarification. I wanted to thank Nikisha and Maria so much for all of their efforts in this. And wanted to just say again, this concludes the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program 2016 Grant Application Assistance Webinar. Thank you all for your attendance and participation, and thank you again to Nikisha and Maria. You've done a great job. We're very much looking forward to working with all of you. As you exit this webinar, a short survey will automatically appear to ask about your experience on the webinar. We're required to report on participant responses to this sort of programming, and very much appreciate your taking a couple of seconds to complete those questions as they will appear. And once again, we'll be emailing a recording of this presentation after the event, and it will also be available online in a few days on our website at the link on your page right now. Thank you very much.